We're going to jump into one of our last topics in Unit 4, which is nested loops. So now that we've talked about loops and talked about iterating through things with them, our next goal is to kind of expand on this in what I would consider to be a kind of two-dimensional way. As of right now, what we can do is just run through a linear set of things. But what if I want to do something a number of times and then do that a number of times as well? And obviously, we could expand on this, to larger and larger degrees. But before I get too far into that, what I've got is a set of examples that we're going to take a look at here, and kind of just make sense of what they do. So, what it means to have a nested loop is whenever we have a loop within another loop here. And so, really, what we want to try and do is make sense of kind of what's going on and be able to determine what is or how these loops interact with each other. So, I'm going to take some notes off to the side down here as far as what this set of loops is going to do for us to try to kind of make sense of them. So let us take a look at what's going on here. So I've got one loop within another. I'm going to focus just on the inner loop. So what is this inner loop doing here? What it is doing is it's starting at the value of 1 and then incrementing up until I is 5 is when I'll exit from this, and incrementing I by 1. And what I'm just doing is I'm printing out, and you'll note that this is just print, not print line, the value of I. So that is my inner loop, and I'm going to do this all, the way I think about this is like, this is kind of like what I'm really doing, and I'm going to do that all, well, 4 times in this case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep track of my 2 variables here. No. Oh, geez, no. I'm going to keep track of my I value and my J value, and then figure out what this is actually going to print out down here. So what happens is I enter in my loop. I don't know where this x equals comes from. I'm just going to delete this. Am I going to use this later? I don't know. So I am going to start with my J value being 1. So it starts out as 1. And then I immediately enter into my second loop. So I is going to have a value of 1 as well. Inside of that loop, then, I'm going to print out the value of I. So what is I's value currently? It is 1. So I print that out, and along with a space, and then I increment back around. And so I gets increased to 2, I print it out, and then to 3, and then I print it out, and then to 4, and then I print it out, and then I get to the value of 5. So I is now 5 at this point, and I exit this loop. Okay, so a couple things happen then that are important at this point. Once I exit this loop, what happens to my I variable? And the answer is that it goes out of scope. It no longer exists. And so when I exit this loop, I disappears, and then I print out a new line. So now I have a new line, and then I will go back to my outer loop here and increment J by 1. So now it is 2. Once I've done that, I go back to my for loop again. And now I has a new value, and it's starting back at 1. This idea of resetting I each time is important. And it happens kind of for 2 different reasons. Reason number 1 is the fact that it goes out of scope. Reason number 2 is that every time I re-enter this loop for a new set of iterations, regardless, so even if I was declared globally instead of locally, I would still get reset here because I'm assigning I's value to be 1. So my point being is that even if I had up here integer I equals 1 to start off with, I wouldn't want to initialize, or rather declare it again, but I will reset its value at the start of every set of iterations for this inner for loop. So that's important. So let me get rid of these. Go away, go away, go away, go away, go away. Perfect. All right, so now I print out a new line. I'm on a new line, and I'm going to do this all again. So then I'm going to print out 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. Oh, not 4, not 5, sorry. And I will keep doing this, and so now J's value gets incremented to be 3. I will keep doing this. I'll do it one more time. until eventually I end up incrementing j to be 4, and I have to exit this loop. Okay, so just by looking at this, what we can kind of tell is that this inner loop does what's in a row, and then my outer loop determines how many times I'm going to do this thing. So we're both trying to be able to read through this set of for loops, but also kind of get this intuitive understanding for what they do. And so let me see if we do have an intuitive understanding. I'm going to make a couple changes here, one at a time. So the first change I'm going to make is I'm going to change this print out to bj. So my question is, what do you think my new print is going to be? So take like a second and think about that. So what's going to happen is my j value, once I enter into my for loop, is constant. So the first time I enter it, I'm still going to get something printed out 4 times because that's what my inner loop does. And I'm going to do that a total of 3 times because that's what my outer loop does. But at each level, it will just be what j is, and so it will be a constant value. And so my printout here is 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, and 3, 3, 3, 3. And so that's my print here for if I change this to be j instead. Because I'm not changing how many times things are being done. I'm just changing what is actually being printed in each case. All right, so that's change number 1. Change number 2 then, so I'm going to change this back to I. What happens if I swap these values? So if I change this to 5, and this to 4. And so what this should tell you is, without too much thought, that I'm going to go back to printing out what I is. So 1, 2 in this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever incrementing values. And then I'm going to do this a certain number of times. And so now my inner loop is going to get done 3 times. And my outer loop tells me that my entire thing gets done 4 times. So that means I get printed 1, 2, 3. So I do my inner loop 3 times. And then how many times am I going to do this inner loop? Well, 4 times total. That's what my entire loop's doing. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's 1, 3, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then one more. 1, 1, 2, 3. So the way I think about this is kind of like, I'm making these boxes out of my for loops whenever they're nested. And so what happens then is that, my inner box is going to determine one of the dimensions. My outer, or my inner loop is going to determine one of the dimensions of my box. My outer loop is going to determine one of the other dimensions of my box. And so looking at 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 is the difference between this outer and this inner loop here. Okay, so that's example number 1. Let's go ahead and get rid of that for a second. Let's look at example number 2. So in example number 2, what I would encourage you to do is to go ahead and pause this and think through on your own what this code is going to do, and then I'll run through what's going to happen here. All right. So let us take a look here at what is different about these nested for loops. The outer one seems to be more or less the same. It's decrementing this time, so I'm starting at 4, and I'm going down to 0 because I'm decrementing. So that's not a huge difference. But then my inner loop, j, is starting at 0, and it's incrementing by 1. But now, and this is the interesting thing, it's dependent on I. So j has to be less than I. And then I'm printing out these asterisks each time. So I'm going to do the same thing where I'm trying to keep track of what my j value is and what my I value is and what I'm actually printing. Okay, so I've got I, I've got j, and then I've got what I'm actually printing. So let's give this a try. So I'm starting off with I is equal to 4, and then I end up decrementing it. But then inside, j is equal to 0. Okay, j is equal to 0. So I am going to print out an asterisk for every value of j up until it gets to the value of I. So that seems reasonable. So in this case, my first time I go through, I'll print out an asterisk, great, in a space. And then I'll increment j by 1. So it's still less than 4. I'll print out another asterisk. I'll increment j by 1, so it's 2, which is still less than 4. So I'll increment j by 1. Sorry, I print out an asterisk. Then print out, increase j by 1. So now it's at 3, which is still less than 4. And then I'll print out one more asterisk before I increment to be 4, of which then I've run out of space, run out of room. And so I will exit this for loop and then print a new line. And once I exit this for loop, j is forgotten. J no longer exists, is out of scope. And so now I gets decremented. It's now 3. And so when I enter back into my inner for loop and j starts at 0, I get restarted again. And so now I can kind of intuitively think, well, now I'm only counting up to 3 instead of 4. I should have 1 less asterisk than what I had before. Then the next loop, when I gets incremented to 2, I'll again have 1 less asterisk. So I'll have asterisk and asterisk. And then again, I will have 1 less asterisk in the final loop through. And so this is what this code prints out. 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, 1 star. Based on these values. So that is the output for that code. What I would encourage you to do is think about, there's multiple ways to do this, but what are some of the simpler ways to flip this? How can you change this to go 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 4, 3, 2, 1? So take a minute and try that. Okay, so I think the easiest way of doing this is to just change what I's starting value is. Instead, let us go up until, let's see. So if I want to start at 1, I'm going to start I's value at 1. And instead, I'm going to increment it. And then while I is less than, okay, I want 4 stars. I guess I need, wait, is this going to work out the way that I want it to? Yeah. I want I to be greater than, or sorry, I has to be less than 5. I has to be less than 5. I guess I haven't run any of this code. Let's go ahead and double check. Now, I'm a little bit nervous about running this because it's going to be really embarrassing if I get it wrong. But this is the kind of stuff where I'm going to accumulate a large number of off by 1 errors, right? Because, I'm running these nested loops where I now have twice the chances of making mistakes where I am off by 1. And so, if to be fair, what's going on right now is I am making, I don't want to say some guesses, but like at least some educated guesses or some intuitive guesses as to how I think this code's going to run. And so since I am sitting here at a computer, I have the luxury of being able to run my code and check to see if it's accurate. Obviously, like something in the AP exam, you would not have that luxury. And so I would probably, in that case, actually spend the time to go and run through it. Thank goodness. I was right. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I made what was an intuitive change, which, is something that's just going to come with practice. But yeah, getting used to these loops and just kind of understanding how they work just takes some time and some experience with them. So that was example number 2. Let's look at the last example. So example number 3. The big difference is that now I'm working with while loops. This is worth noting because I can obviously make nested loops with while loops instead of for loops. It's no big deal. The question is, what changes are there going to be, if any? So let's look at this. This seems very similar to the first one that I had. It's just that, I have to take care of the initializing of variables on my own. It's not done within the for loop. I obviously have my conditionals in here that I'm checking, but I also have to take care of the incrementing on my own as well. So let's see what this does. If we think through this real quick, it looks like j is going to be increased from 0 to 4 and be printed out each time. And then I'm going to do that roughly 4 or 5 times, I guess, because I'm starting at 0. Okay, that is the just real quick read of this. The question is, am I right or am I wrong? So actually, I would encourage you to. I'll tell you right now, I'm wrong. That's not what's going to happen. I would encourage you to pause this real quick and think about what is actually going to happen. Something that might not be totally obvious. All right, let's go run this and see what my printout is. Run it. And okay, I only get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then blank, 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 blank. Why is that? Let's go back and look. So if I increment my j variable, so this inner loop, the first time through, works exactly how I think it's going to. J goes from 0 to 1, 2, 3 to 4, and all those get printed out as seen here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I exit this while loop. I increment, or sorry, I print out a new line, then I increment I by 1, and then I loop back around. Here's the issue, okay? And this is one of the big differences between while loops and and for loops is that I had to declare my variable j earlier. Not necessarily right here, but I had to declare it at some point. So the issue is that when I leave this while loop, it does not go out of scope. And so j's value is actually still at 5. And so this makes sense then that since j's value is still at 5, this while loop will not get run the second time. I'll just end up printing out a new line. And so that's why I get skip new line, new line, new line, new line, new line, and I never actually go into this this inner while loop. So what's an easy fix on that? Well, I need to actually update j's value every time or before I go into this while loop, and that's an easy fix. What I can just do is throw it in here. And so now every time I loop back around and start this inner while loop for a new time, I will have automatically changed j back to 0. And so I can save this and run it and hopefully get what we were probably expecting, which was a whole box worth of 0 through 4, and that 5 times. Okay, so that's what nested for loops do. I would make the argument, should I make this argument? I want to make the argument at least that a lot of things that we do with nested for loops probably don't have to be done with nested for loops. A lot of times we can find solutions to those types of things through other means, but I definitely don't want to make the argument that all things that can be solved with nested for loops can be done otherwise. Sometimes I definitely need to nest my loops like this. So being able to nest them and kind of work through intuitively how these work and what's going on with them is a good skill to have. This will be especially useful to us when we move on to later units, especially the unit about what are called two-dimensional arrays, which is kind of looping through a grid worth of things, and nested loops are going to be super helpful for that. So this is one more skill that we have now working with loops. It's our ability to nest them. I'd like to think about kind of working through things in 2 dimensions. But it'll be a helpful thing and a helpful tool for us later.